Welcome to another video on data to decisions. In this video, we'll be building a line chart with multiple series in Microsoft Excel. We'll be starting with some raw data, like the ones you see on the left of here on screen. And then we'll be building a chart that looks like this, where we have two series. One is product revenue and the other one is services revenue. And we're going to be plotting that as a monthly trend. So line charts are very effective tools to easily explain to the user how a certain metric has changed over time. And in this case, when we use multiple series, now we are also able to compare how that trend is similar or different between two series. So, for example, how the product revenue and the services revenue have trended over months and how they are different from each other or similar to each other. So, this is something that we can do very, very quickly in Microsoft Excel. So, let's get started. So, we are going to start with some raw data. So, the raw data we have is on here, month, product, services. So, I'm going to focus on these three columns now. I'll explain it later towards end of the video why I have the column B, but we'll start with these three columns. Click outside anywhere, and if you do insert, 2D chart with markers, there is nothing there now because we didn't select any data for it. So right click, select data. I'm going to create a new series, or series is nothing but a line. And so I'm going to name this, the first one as product, because that's the product revenue. And for values, I'm going to select all these values. The horizontal axis in a line chart, so we have the horizontal axis, and the horizontal axis in this case will be months, names or abbreviations of months. Now I'm going to, if I look behind, Excel has already built a line chart for me, a simple single series line chart. I'm going to now create or add another series, and this time I will call that as services, and I will choose these values as, okay, so this is something I have to clear everything and then make sure that I select these values and then press OK. The horizontal is the same, so I'm going to select the same and then press OK. If you want to, for example, modify something, you can always go and say right click, select data and add more series or remove a series. So you will, by understanding this more detailed method, now you'll be able to add and remove series, add and remove more lines or fewer lines very, very quickly. So now that we are done with how to create a line chart in basic line chart in Microsoft Excel, now let's go ahead and start formatting it to make it a very effective visual. So I'm going to go to the plus sign here and add a chart title. So this is where I will enter. So comparing revenue by month, product versus services, something like that, where you have an effective informational title that your audience can understand. And we will know that over there. So we have a title. I'm going to now add a legend. So always click a chart and go to plus, add a legend, and it'll put it on the right side by default, but you can also go and say put it at the top. In this case, if I have only two series, I am going to move my legend over here. That'll give me more space for the chart. You can also control the legend size, the font size, by clicking on the legend and then maybe making the modification on the font size for the legend. So now that we have covered that, now let's talk about the x-axis and the y-axis. Again, select the chart, do the plus, select this axis titles. This will put axis titles on both x and y-axis. So for the x-axis, I'm going to call it month. And then for the y-axis, I will call it revenue. And now I can click on it. Again, make the plot area a little bit larger. You do have control over the formatting of the x-axis and the y-axis. You can click or right-click and then format axis. And this will open up the format axis options. There are a lot more settings available. The important thing here would be, how do you want this number to be formatted? Do you want it to be formatted with commas? Do you want it to be with decimals? Do you want it to be with other, like for example, if you're dealing with large numbers, you can make it automatically millions. So there are more things to be done there. But what I want to communicate in the introduction video is that you have more control over the values in the axis. Now let's go ahead and modify the grid lines. So the grid lines are the horizontal lines, which you can right click, format grid lines. and you can change it. You can remove the grid lines completely also. I like to keep them. It provides some value as orienting numbers when people visualize or look at the charts. However, the lines should be the center of attention here, so that's why I'm moving the grid lines to the back. Now we have everything done. We just need to format the lines. So before we go to the line formatting, there's one more thing I had to mention, which is with the y-axis, when you click on it and then say format axis, you will see these options. An important thing to consider is this is how you can set the minimum for the y-axis and then the maximum. By default, Excel will automatically assign this based on the data you have. It is almost always recommended that the minimum should be set to 0. So if I select this and then say 0 and press enter, it will now change to hard coded 0. So it will not change. Excel will not automatically try to find what is the minimum. In this setup, Excel will still try to automatically find the maximum. So for example, you see the auto symbol next to the maximum. It means that it's going to automatically select. So how do I know? Let's test it out. In the product, let's say for January, instead of 8,100, if I make it 15,000. So now you see what happens. The zero is still the minimum, but then the maximum has become 16,000. So Excel will automatically try to adjust the y-axis values based on that setting. I'm going to undo this because I don't want like 15,000. Let's get back to 8,100. But important thing there is that you want to set this to 0. In most cases, that is the recommended approach. I'll do a separate video more on that alone, but just make sure that that setting is looked into. So now we are ready to go to the line formatting. Right click on any of the lines, format data series, go to the fill and line option. So the first thing is the line, instead of automatic color, I can change the color. So I will change it to, let's say, one of the blues. And then I will change the width of the line. I don't want it to be the width to be so high. So I've selected 1.5. And then I can also change the type of line. So do I want a dashed line? Do I want a solid line? So in this case, let's try the dashed line. And this is about the line. Now you can also control the marker. So I can click on marker, and the marker again has a lot of options. So marker will allow us to change, instead of a circle as a marker, do you want any of these other options? You can even do images and things like that. But let's again focus on the basics in this video. I'm going to retain the circle, and you can control the size. So let's say I want to make it a little bit smaller, so I'll make it 4. Then I can change the color inside those marker circles. So I'm going to make it light gray, but I want the border of the marker to be colorful. So border, solid line, and let's say this, you can do the same blue or you can do a darker blue. So let's see how it looks when we zoom in. So you have a dashed blue line with a gray circle marker with a border of a darker blue. So again, this is just one way how you can format them. Now I'm going to do the similar thing with the second line. Right click, format data series. I am going to go to the fill in line, go to solid line, change the color to be something else. So let's say I want to make it red. I'll keep the same width in this case, 1.5. And this time I want a solid line, not a dashed line. Go to marker, and in the marker options, I will retain the same, I think we had 4 as the size, so I'll keep it consistent. And then I'll explain why or the recommended approach of when you have multiple lines, how do you format that just in a minute. Let's just finish this. So I'm going to do a same solid fill of gray and then do a bordered solid line of a little bit darker red, pretty consistent with how we did the blue. So now, so we have the two series. So recommendation when you have multiple series is there is no hard and fast rule, but the guideline should be when the user looks at your chart, they should be able to easily distinguish the different series. We know that we have legend, but when you have, let's say, 6 lines or so, it becomes harder to differentiate between them. You can either go very colorful but it can be very distracting. So if you're not going for multiple colors, if you're doing different shades of blue, for example, it might be harder for some people to distinguish between the different lines. In such cases, you can use also dashed lines versus solid line. So color is not the only way to distinguish the lines. You can do it based on markers. So for example, instead of the circle as the marker for the second one, I could also choose another marker, which might be, let's say, a square. By this way, even, I mean, regardless of if anybody is colorblind or if anybody has other challenges with easily differentiating the different series or colors, they can still understand the chart better. So in case you're still printing it, the colors may come out. If they're not printing it in proper colors, it will be difficult to distinguish between the lines. So in such cases, the markers, even the marker sizes, the lines, whether it's a dotted line or a dashed line or a solid line, these can be used to distinguish the lines. The bottom line is the user should be able to distinguish the different series easily without any confusion. Okay, so now that's all about formatting the lines. One thing we haven't done is adding the labels. So click on the chart, go to plus, add data labels. So this will add labels. You can click on a label series and make the font a little bit. If you have a lot of data points, then you can click on them and then change the font size. My recommendation would be if you have a lot of lines, definitely adding all the data labels is not a good idea. I'll do another video shortly where I can explain how you can do selective labeling, only label certain data points to make it clutter-free and easy for the user to follow. The final thing is select the chart, and you can actually change the border. So I'm going to put a, brown border. I almost forgot about one last thing, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Why do I even have this date column? So let me explain that. So I am going to, um, instead, uh, let's just do it in the same chart. If I can right click and select data, we have selected the horizontal x-axis labels to be text values, but you can also choose a date value. So for example, I'm going to choose these values, which are dates. And then in the services and this, now we have dates as the x-axis. So I'm going to hit OK. The thing with the x-axis being a date value is when you right click on it and say format axis, you see this axis type as automatically select based on data. So Excel will try to automatically understand this is a date value. Now I can do some other things with it. And by default, just leave it as the automatically selected. That should be okay. But now you can actually control the minimum and the maximum, bounds and things like that. But more importantly, now the data is considered to be a continuous series data. For example, instead of the February being the second value in our data, even if it is in the 10th value, the plot will still be accurate. It will represent January, February, March correctly. But while when the way we previously did it with the month as a text value, Excel just thinks of that as absolute text value. So it will plot exactly in the same order. If Feb is in the second, it'll put Feb as a second data point. If Feb is in the 10th point, it'll put in the 10th point. But now that we use the date values, Excel can now say, I know, regardless of where it is, February comes after January. So Excel is able to understand the date values and plot it in a right way if in case you have that as a date value. You can still format it, right click format, go to the number, and you can change the formatting. So if I wanted only month, then I can go and say MMM as a format code and hit add. Now, this again gets us back to where we were. Even though there is a date value in the x-axis, we can show that like a abbreviation of months. So this is another way. If in case your data has dates, you can use this approach. Again, there's fundamentally not much difference except the formatting, as I mentioned, right-clicking formatting. Now your options are a little bit different because it is a date value. So hope that's helpful. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics to be covered in this channel, please let me know. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.